Well, good. Thanks for being here this evening. I appreciate you being here for a number of reasons. First of all, what we're going to talk about this evening is something that I care deeply about and have a passion for. And so when you hear the term private family foundation, understand that that term family, in fact, is what gives private foundation such meaning and such depth. What's interesting about a private foundation, and that's what we're going to talk about this evening, is we're going to talk about what is a private family foundation, how you can benefit from using a private foundation, and maybe more importantly than anything else, we need to know enough or be aware of this entity to such a depth and such a level to consider whether or not we even qualify to have a private foundation. So we're going to cover all of those areas, but I want you to sit back, I want you to relax, be prepared to have a good time, because we're going to talk about things that represent what I consider to be significance. And when I use the word significance, let me put it in a context that we can all appreciate. One thing that you'll hear about the Stewardship Institute, you'll always hear us say or challenge people to move beyond success to significance. And the reason we do that is because people get so locked into success, which is all about output, very seldom do they ever consider the possibility or the fact that there is something that goes beyond success called significance, which is all about outcomes. So we're going to explore both things this evening. And by doing that, by exploring that, what I want you to do is I want you to practice a learning principle this evening. Because if you practice this principle, not only will you leave empowered, but you'll have ownership of the material, the things, the topics that we talk about this evening, which I think is absolutely essential to the learning process. So here's the principle. I will learn by what I hear. I got to point to the right body parts here. I will learn by what I hear, what I see, and what I feel. I will write down the things that I learn, and I will go do them. Okay, does that make sense? And I'll repeat that. I will learn by what I hear, what I see, and what I feel. I'll write those things down, and I will go do them. Okay? Now, that brings us back to the term private family foundation. When you think of family, what do you visualize? What do you think about? And probably more importantly, what do you feel? Okay? Because families are not only the essential building block or unit in society to determine whether a society is going to be healthy or be ill, but it's everything. It's the laboratory. It's where we learn principles. It's where we appreciate and experience values. It's where we start to create our beliefs and all of those kinds of things. So here's the interesting thing about family. You're not going to find it in the Internal Revenue Code. Okay? So we might as well just come to terms with that. But you will find definitions and code sections on private foundation. So when you hear the word family, just appreciate the fact that it's a term that identifies the type of private foundation that we're talking about. And what that means is typically you have a private foundation that was created by a family member, and now it's directed, managed, and controlled by family members. And that brings out three elements that I consider to be absolutely essential for building wealth. Now, I hope your ears perked up on that one, because what we're going to talk about is we're not only going to talk about building wealth, but we're going to talk about the best way to protect it, preserve it, direct it, and make sure that that wealth can go from one generation to the next. In fact, what if I could show you a way to get a 691% return on an investment of $130? Would that be of interest to you? You come to the workshop tomorrow and I'll show you how you can get a 691% return on an investment of $130. And that's using your foundation. And again, that's just one end of the spectrum. On the other side, you take a look at the private foundation, and just recently, within the last year and a half or so, and I think we all recognize this name, Bill Gates. Okay? I don't know Bill Gates. I've never met the man, but I have followed his career. And it's fascinating to watch the evolution that has occurred in how he sees, how he thinks, and how he feels. Now, his wife, Melinda, Bill and Melinda, created what is called the Bill and Melinda Gates Family Foundation. And about a year and a half ago, Bill Gates took the largest dividend distribution that had ever been offered by Microsoft. Well, obviously that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, he's a decision maker within Microsoft. Now, this dividend distribution was valued at $3 billion. Okay? $1 billion. Now, Ordinarily, any other individual that would take that kind of a dividend distribution, what would they be subject to as soon as they received that kind of a distribution? Taxes, okay? Now, in this case, Bill Gates may have or would have experienced what kind of a tax? A capital gain tax, all right? Now, if you take $3 billion and you apply a capital gain tax against that $3 billion, what kind of erosion of wealth do you think Bill Gates would have experienced? A third? 20%? 30%? It really doesn't matter. The point is, whatever it is, it's a lot, okay? Now, what we've got to do is we've got to appreciate and understand how Bill Gates looks at wealth, because he is probably the epitome of a capitalist. And now what he's done is he's taken his thinking, his mindset from being a for-profit capitalist to now what we call a social capitalist. But here's what Bill Gates did. He designed his estate in such a way that that $3 billion, when it's distributed, it goes directly to the Bill and Melinda Gates Family Foundation. Zero tax, okay? Now, the reason he was able to do that is because he had a qualified charity that Bill and Melinda Gates set up. They control it, they manage it, they direct it, and they get to distribute to those charitable activities, enterprises, or projects that they freely choose to participate in, all right? So what they're doing is, in fact, or at least I appreciate, is they're showing us a model for not only building wealth and preserving it, but how to direct it and how to manage it, and certainly go beyond success to what we call significance, okay? Now, here's Bill Gates, and let's just kind of imagine for a moment that Bill Gates sits down with his accountant, and I'm sure he has a team of accountants, and he says, look, here's the problem. I'm going to be accepting a dividend distribution from Microsoft, and it's going to look like about $3 billion. What would you suggest that I do to best preserve and protect that $3 billion? What do you think the answer was? Maybe, maybe not. The foundation, perhaps, maybe they aren't even aware of it. Now, in his case, I think they were because it was set up. But look at a normal circumstance. If you go into your accountant and say, there's going to be a dividend distribution, or I have a highly appreciated asset that we're going to sell, and it looks like we're going to have this kind of a capital gain tax liability associated with it, what would you suggest that I do? All right? Now, there's several strategies that they might suggest, but most of those strategies just offer a deferral. At some point in time, you're going to have to pay for that. You're going to have to pay that tax. In Bill Gates' circumstance, or let's say outside of Bill Gates' circumstance, you were to say to your accountant, there's going to be a $3 billion distribution, and he just simply goes, well, just pay the $1 billion, and you still have $2 billion left. It's not uncommon to hear that kind of advice, because in their mind, they're thinking what? What's the big deal? You still have $2. What's the problem with giving away $1? Okay, now, here's how Bill Gates looks at things. Giving away $1 billion, that was not a great obstacle for him, because certainly he has more than enough. But what he sees is he sees that $1 billion times a return, times 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 20 years. So he sees the potential of a cure for AIDS. He sees the potential for creating a whole new model for education. He sees and envisions a lot of good things happening with that money. Now, if he freely chooses to do nothing, and he engages in the strategy that's offered by government, then the outcome is going to be what? It's going to be gone forever, and it represents lost opportunity costs. But in this case, because Bill Gates structured his affairs in such a way, he was able to recapture that capital, and by having it go into the Bill and Melinda Gates Family Foundation, it now becomes what is called social capital, because why? Why do you think it's called social capital? What do you think? What do you think? Go ahead. It's capital that's devoted to the social needs or good or the betterment of society. Okay? Now, a lot of people would probably think, well, shoot, why would you want to do that? I mean, I can remember the day that my 12-year-old son came home from school. He's 12 now. This was probably when he was 9 years old. I can remember the day he came home from school, and Howie knows my son very well. This is Greg. And he comes home from school and he goes, you know what, Dad? All of my friends think you're stupid. And I go, geez, Greg, I mean, what's going on? What did you say? Well, they asked me what you do for a living. I go, well, what did you tell them? Well, I told them you teach people how to give their money away. And they thought that was pretty stupid. And I go, well, Greg, let's talk about that for a moment. There's probably a better response to that. But isn't that a normal perception? Not only with little children, but with adults. You're going to do what? You're going to give your money away? But what they don't understand is that all of us live in a world that's full of what? A lot of eroding factors, a lot of forces that are at work to separate us from the things that we have. So what I want to do is I want to go to the board for just a minute, and we're going to create some definitions, and then we're going to see what it means to be a social capitalist and to see how we qualify. And not only that, but see that if we can't build wealth at a greater level and get greater results. And if we can do that, maybe we can do something very significant this evening. Okay? Now here's what we're going to do. Imagine you sitting down with your youngsters or your children, and you have to explain to them what an estate is. What would you tell them? What is an estate? Now you have to understand, I've got some really young kids. Your kids may be a little bit older or whatever, but if you were to try to define or describe to them what an estate is, what would you offer to them? Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's exactly what I do with my kids. Dad, what is an estate? Well, it's our stuff. Okay? Now, we can go into some more technical definitions and things, but let's just keep things simple. Because the more simple it is, the easier it is for them to understand. The easier it is for them to understand, the greater awareness they're going to have. And one thing that I've learned, if you can understand and you have greater awareness, you're going to have greater choices. And that's really one of the things we're going to talk about tonight, is just having more choices. And when it comes to wealth and it comes to our stuff, you can't have enough choices. Okay? Now, let's take a look at an estate. What kinds of things would you typically find in an estate? Okay? We've got real property, as in real estate. What else? What do you think? We got personal property, cars, boats, furniture, collections, collectibles. What else? Stock or equities. And isn't that what Bill Gates had? He had equity in Microsoft. He took the equity and he simply transferred or gifted that to the Bill and Melinda Gates Family Foundation. And by doing that, he took that equity out of his estate. Okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that process. All right? What else would you what might you find? Insurances, right? And retirement funds. Okay, I think you get the idea. I mean, this list could go on and on and on. And you could have a pretty complicated estate. On the other hand, it could not have, it perhaps not that much value, but it could be very complicated. In fact, I think if you looked at the Bill Gates estate, it's probably not that complicated, but it's huge. Okay? Because you know, as a capitalist, where his devotion or commitment is. It's Microsoft. But we're also seeing Bill Gates, he's done something very unique with his stuff. Okay? Because I think Bill Gates understands that when it comes to your stuff, there are a lot of forces at work that are determined to separate you from your stuff. And we'll just call these eroding factors. All right? Now, if we were to identify some of these eroding factors, what would they be? What kind of challenges are each and every one of us in this room facing on a daily basis when it comes to protecting, preserving, and growing our estate? We've got taxes. We got lawsuits. Okay? Any kind of liability, next door neighbor. It can go on and on and on. It can be family. I don't know if any of you have experienced a probate, but that certainly is an eroding process, isn't it? It just doesn't help build or bring families together. The thing of it is we know that we can start to minimize or eliminate a lot of these eroding factors if we do what? Do a little bit of planning.